Talking Bristol, and our guest tonight is Ruth Fortune. Ruth is a candidate for the first congressional district in covering from Hartford. And welcome, Ruth. Nice you could make it here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Do I call you Attorney Fortune or
Ruth is fine.
Ruth is fine? Excellent. Yes. I'm glad you made it out here. I mean, driving over in the snow, was that an experience in itself?
That took me 10 minutes.
Right. Well,
the
snow piles are about 5 feet high on each side. Yes. Ruth is a trust and estate attorney at the firm of Wigan and Dana, and she's a former financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. She's lived in Haiti, New York, Des Moines, Iowa, the south of France, and in Connecticut. She's been lived in Waterbury, and now she lives in Hartford. Only in Hartford. Oh, no, maybe. Let's see. When you were Westbury, when you were in New York.
Westbury, New York. Yeah.
New York, yes. Okay, my mistake. Thanks. All right. So she serves as on the executive board of the Estate and Business Planning Council of Hartford, as a secretary, as vice president of the board of directors of the Betty Knox Foundation, which provides grants to organizations serving Hartford residents, on the board of directors of the Hartford County Bar Association, and as a trustee on her church's investment committee. She is also on the Hartford Board of Education. She was appointed to the board, and she chairs the policy committee. We have lots of Board of Education issues here in Bristol. And so what we'd like to do is, we have some time, so we're not rushed. And do you want to fix that, or is that? Okay, great. All right, so I'd like to start because this is not a hurry up interview that you've been used to. It's more of a conversation. So there's some things that I would like to cover, but it's your prerogative to take things where you want to go, and let's see what happens. But the first thing I'd like to start with is somewhat of a philosophical question, just about government. We're in the throes of some let's say, interesting situation right now with government. And I'd like to ask if you could make a distinction between what you see government and governing, or how you see those things, as opposed to how you see politics and politicians. So I don't know if that's enough to go with, but so government as opposed to politics.
To me, government is a necessary force in society, and it's one that should be used for good. But it's only used for good when you have the people in those positions of power who are committed to serving the people and serving the public and serving the people's interests. Whereas politics, really, it's the means to get through that governance role. You have to go through the political process to be able to govern. But not everyone who governs is elected. We have lots of people who are appointed. Obviously, I'm seeking an elected role. I'm pursuing the path of governing through public election and through being elected. But governing itself, good governance should try to remove the politics, right? Once you're in that position, you're governing, you should govern with the best interests of the people in mind and try to minimize the political noise in the background as you try to govern.
With the Board of Education, you're appointed.
Correct.
You're appointed, but that is also an elected role at some point. So how do you put that into practice? And maybe you have an example, because I know from our own experience here in Bristol that the Board of Education can be a pretty challenging position, to be in. So you have a distinction between those two things, because you really didn't have to be a politician to get on the board, but you are governing right now.
True, that's correct. So Hartford Public Schools, the Board of Education is interesting. It's a bifurcated system where the 9 members, 5 of them are appointed by the mayor and 4 of them are elected. So I'm one of the 5 appointees. And then there's 4 of my colleagues who are elected. the mayor asked me to serve. To be completely candid, I was quite reluctant at first. Not because I did not want to serve, but because I knew it was a huge responsibility. And I'm an attorney in private practice. The demand on my time is really high as a practicing attorney. I have a certain number of hours I'm committed to spend doing client work and other firm work. And my firm only makes money by me billing my time to clients in increments of 6 minutes. So my time is my
That
time
always
is
amazes me
sacred.
when I hear what lawyers have to do to keep track of their
Right.
their hours. Yes.
Yes, I
Yeah.
used to literally know what I did every day in 6-minute increments. That was my day to day. So when the mayor reached out and asked me to serve, I was reluctant more so because I knew the demands of being a board of education member, and I did not want to say yes and not do it well.
Mhm.
I was fortunate that when I did say yes, my firm has been incredibly supportive in allowing me to perform that task and perform it well. But more importantly, I said yes because at the time, 2 of my 3 children were in Hartford Public Schools. My third was still too young to be enrolled in
Mhm.
school, but I knew she would join her 2 siblings at the same school, and all 3 now are at the same school, right down the street from where we live. It was a way of giving back to my community and ensuring that my children and students in Hartford, were getting the education that they deserve and doing my small piece in that. So for me, that was another outlet of community service, just that I've served on other boards,
Mhm.
throughout my career and other work that I've done.
So this idea of service, have you always maintained some kind of what you say is um, a a service role? I wanted to say, I'm thinking about almost a church analogy where you have a servant role.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that resonates but you've always, is that something that you were grown up, that you grew up with, where you participate in these things and you have to give back to the community in whatever way you can?
It's a very conscious choice that I've always made as an adult to just always have a way to give back to my community because I feel like I've received so much. And I've always worked in the private sector, except for 5 months when I worked in the Obama 2012 reelection campaign.
Mhm.
So, given that I've worked in the private sector, I've always had an outlet to give back. And generally, it takes the form of serving in nonprofit boards. At one point, I served on the West End Civic Association organization. I was a secretary and in other capacities as well. When I became an attorney, I would also, through both firms I've been with, they've allowed me to take on pro bono work, mostly representing children and marginalized
Mhm.
children.
Mhm.
And when the mayor asked me to serve in the Board of Education, that was just another way to serve again in another huge capacity.
Oh, that's terrific. Um, of course, uh, if you were elected to the first district as a congressperson, Bristol has a bunch of your constituents. And we've had some issues in Bristol with our Board of Education, and specifically rising costs of special education. It's a statewide deal, but is there anything on the federal level that might be able to address some of those issues that would kind of help alleviate some of that financial pressure?
Absolutely. Public education funding has been chronically underfunded for years. Public education funding has been chronically underfunded for years, and it affects the quality of education that our students are receiving. And we're talking about the cost of education. Every child learns differently, and the cost to educate each child is different. It's really not an area where equal means fair. There's equity and there's equality.
Mhm.
As a parent, I can tell you my 3 children, each one of them needs something slightly different from me at different times.
Mhm.
And it's the same idea with how we educate children. And when we're talking about students with special needs or multi-language learners, they need more resources to be able to absorb the information or to have that information presented to them in a way that they can digest and continue to learn and grow. And until we have a funding mechanism that aligns with that, there's always going to be children who are falling through the cracks. And in Hartford, just like here in Bristol, the cost of special education has been rising over time. Not only because so many students have those needs to be met, but also just the inflation in that space has been higher than just traditional
Mhm.
inflation. And we're not getting sufficient funding to pay for the services that all of our students need.
So when I say Department of Education, is it necessary or not?
Absolutely. Department of Education is necessary. The federal government also has a bigger role to play and ensuring that we're fully funding our schools. We should be funding schools where teachers are making a strong wage, where they're compelled to become teachers and stay in those roles. We should have enough funding to pay our other staff better, our para educators. It's been really challenging to even recruit para educators because you could make you could earn more working at Amazon or at Target.
Mm.
And our budget as a school doesn't allow us to pay every single person in our buildings who are interacting with our students, teaching them and intervening when there is a need. We simply don't have the funds to pay all of them the wage that they deserve.
The there's a movement in I guess in educational circles, you have charter schools. The impetus for charter schools actually was a union initiative saying that these would be incubators where people could kind of test different techniques that would be then incorporated into public schools. Now, I may be wrong, but that's what I have from my own understanding. And I'm a former educator. I guess a former educator, always an educator, and I've always been interested in education, and I will continue to be interested in education. So the idea that these organizations or these operations now have kind of turned into competitors rather than this incubation for experimenting with different techniques in schools. What is your feeling about that? I mean, is this something that is actually helping, or is it hurting? I mean, the idea of competition typically would be something where it would be helping, but I'm almost of a different opinion on that. So, charter schools. Where do you stand on charter schools?
In short, I am not in favor of charter schools. Any system that allows a school to choose which students it gets to serve while extracting resources from our public school system is hurting the public schools, because the public school has to educate any child who lives in its geographic region. So charter schools not only can choose which children they serve, also there's a lot of resources that would stay in public schools that end up going to charter schools and make it even harder for the public schools to do its job, which is educate any child that attends that school. My children in public school were committed to keeping them in public schools. And if at some point public schools were not serving their needs, would probably do something other than a charter school, because I do think it's not creating competition. It is extracting resources that are much needed from our public schools.
We have here in Bristol initiative right now where a charter school organization or operation from New York is trying to set up something here. So that's something that's been on my mind, and I think some people in the community, it's been in their mind too. And so I think you have to have a conversation about that. Lots of times what happens is when those things are introduced, it almost comes as a surprise, and it gives an advantage to the people who are bringing in the charter schools. It's me getting on my high horse a little bit.
It's a hot topic in my household too.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes. So you have experience, and as with your background, born in Haiti, came here to the United States, and that must have given you some kind of a perspective on this whole educational issue. How did that inform some of your thoughts about how education should work? And maybe you can fill us in a little bit on your background too.
Sure, absolutely. My family moved here from Haiti in 2000. I was 12 years old at the time. My brother was 8. And we came here for the same reason so many other immigrants have come, in search of economic opportunity. My mother was the visionary behind that. She convinced my dad to get along. And when we were in Haiti, my mother worked for the Canadian ambassador in Haiti. So relative to most Haitians, we were doing fairly well in the sense that she had a steady job. She enrolled us in the best private schools that she could afford. By the time I left Haiti, I had completed 6th grade. I was studying 5 languages. I was taking geometry and physics and just doing so much. And the schools were also very student led. I was my class leader, if you will. And it was my job to make sure our classroom got clean.
Really.
And it was my job to make sure that some of the other activities on campus would happen and we would plan them. So there was a lot of student led initiatives, at least at the school that I attended.
Now, was that a public school? Do they have public schools per se in Haiti, or is it some other structure?
So I went to private Catholic schools. There were some public schools. I had never attended a public school in Haiti. in part because the public schools were really under-resourced. A lot of times the teachers would strike because they were not paid sufficiently. So putting your child in public school really meant not allowing them to get the education they deserve.
Mhm.
And my mother, as someone who herself had been deprived of an education for most of her childhood, that was paramount for her. When she became a mother, a lot of her earnings went into paying for housing and food and making sure that we went to really good schools.
Mhm.
So when we moved here, I enrolled in Westbury Middle School, where we lived in Westbury, New York. I was very fortunate. My school, it was a predominantly Black and brown school. And by virtue of being in Long Island, it was just very well resourced. I remember asking my teacher's assistant in my classroom when she told me I should stay after school to do homework. I said, "Well, how much does that cost? I'm not sure we can pay." And
Mhm.
she said, "Nothing." And I thought, "Nothing? You mean like nothing at all?"
Mhm.
And I was blown away. And lunch was free. I had to bring my
Mhm.
lunch to school in Haiti. Because I was also a very studious child who knew how to express that I want to learn, I received all the attention that I ever needed. Within a year, I was out of English language class, English learning classes, and into mainstream classes, and almost already into honors classes. By the time I got to high school, I got to take AP classes. I went to Syracuse University for a summer and took 2 college classes
Mhm.
as a high school student because there was a federal program that paid for that. I had every opportunity under the sun that my parents couldn't offer to me because of just they were low earning immigrants at the time and didn't speak English, but my school offered all of that to me, including transportation. When I did sports or after school activities, we had a late bus that would take me home. My parents never had to drive me anywhere because they never drove.
What
So
sports?
I did softball, I did tennis, and I did track and
Oh,
fields.
so 3 seasons.
I
Yeah.
never excelled at any of them. So I knew I needed to get good grades and stay in school. Unfortunately, now my son is really into sports and he seems to be a better athlete than I ever was. So that's encouraging.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Your experience too while you were in school as an immigrant, you were an undocumented person.
Mhm.
What kind of things did you experience as a child? What were you aware of? What kind of ways did it affect your thinking?
I was fully aware that I was undocumented. And the way that my family advised me to cope with that was to not tell anyone. Because if I told someone in my 12, 13-year-old brain at the time, someone could just call the police on me and I can get deported. It also meant that I felt that I needed to do everything right because if I made even the littlest mistake, that could be my path to deportation. I also had cousins who were US citizens and who were my age. So
Mm.
I really got to juxtapose how I lived versus how they lived. When my classmates and my cousin, when she turned 16, she got a permit. I couldn't do that because at the time, New York State, you couldn't get a permit or driver's license if you were an undocumented immigrant. And it really became a huge factor in my life by the time I became a senior and had to apply to college
Mhm.
because I couldn't get financial aid. And I was salutatorian of my high school class. I had really strong grades, but I had to go to schools where I could actually afford to pay. I still remember Syracuse, where I had been the summer before as a high
Mhm.
school student and had good
Yeah.
grades. I got a conditional acceptance letter that said, provided you can pay, I forget what the tuition was at the time, 50
Mhm.
something $1,000,
Mhm.
sure, you're admitted into Syracuse. And of course, to me, that meant I'm not admitted because I can't afford to pay.
Mhm.
I was fortunate enough that I got into Baruch College in Manhattan. And at the time, tuition was $2,160 a semester. And Baruch and the CUNY system overall, the City University of New York school systems, they are really known as an engine of upward mobility for a
Mhm.
lot of first generation Americans and first generation college students. And I got to Baruch. My first semester, I left home at 18. I had about $4,000 in just private scholarship money from business owners in the
Mhm.
community because I was salutatorian. I got some of that private scholarship money. It was enough for my first semester's tuition and 4 months of rent in a small sublet that I got in Manhattan at $350 a month. And I left. I thought, what do I have to lose? I stay here in my parents' basement apartment. What else am I going to do? We didn't drive, so transportation and mobility
Mhm.
was limited in a way that it wouldn't be in Manhattan. And I really, frankly, I worked hard, but I really lucked out. I waitressed my way through college after that first semester. The money I earned paid for my rent, paid for my tuition. And My very final semester at Baruch College, I was a corporate finance major. Very practical
Mhm.
degree. Most of my friends in my honors classes who had grades similar like myself, they had offers at some of the big four accounting firms, of the JP Morgans and the Goldman Sachs. I didn't because
Yeah,
I couldn't apply for those jobs.
right.
And a terrible earthquake ravaged Haiti in January of 2010. And in response to that earthquake, the Obama administration gave Haitians temporary protected status. And for me, that timing was impeccable. I was 4 months away from graduation with a degree that I would just hang on my wall and not be able to use. And that was a transformative experience because not only did it allow me to get out of the shadow economy and start getting work authorization and not fear deportation for the first time, I also saw the power of government as a force for good.
Mhm.
I had internalized the shame of being undocumented. At the time, my vocabulary for it was really just being illegal. And I thought my parents didn't plan well enough. You know, there's
Oh,
things they could have done
yeah.
differently. There's so much maybe I could have done differently. And it took some years, even after I got my TPS through the Obama administration, to realize there were systemic forces at play, systemic barriers at play that I was just not acknowledging at the time because I was so focused on just trying to do what's in front of me and trying to do what I can. And that planted the seed, frankly, for me to at some point want to seek public office and serve because it didn't cost the American people anything to give me TPS and tens of thousands of other Haitians.
Mhm.
Yet I entered the workforce, was able to contribute more in taxes, help my family more, help other relatives back in Haiti, ultimately allowed me to proceed on to law school. And my life would have been different if I never got that TPS.
And the moment that you realized that, what was the moment that you realized that there were systemic forces at play? Is that something you can kind of concretize, kind of visualize a moment?
So the moment I realized maybe I'd want to be in public service at some point was when I saw all of these doors now open up, and what it took was a decision that wasn't within my control. But in terms of the systemic forces themselves, I think I learned them throughout the course of my adulthood, including when I became an attorney at my prior firm. I did a lot of elder law work,
Mhm.
and I thought people who did everything they were supposed to do, you had a professional job and so on, you'd retire comfortably with the asset you've acquired. And I had clients coming to me as a young 30, 31-year-old
Right.
attorney
Yeah.
who were retired teachers, retired nurses, professionals, accomplished people who my parents encouraged me to be as an adult. And now they were in their 70s or 80s. They realized as their health was declining, they would have to spend everything they've ever earned
Mhm.
and accumulated on their long term care because long term care is not part of healthcare in this country.
Mhm.
And a lot of them, by the time they realize that the tools that I have as an attorney to help them navigate that, they're more restricted. And many times it was a matter of helping them spend down and deplete the assets to get
Yeah.
them financially eligible for Medicaid to get the care that they needed and deserve. So I think then as I became a mother, you see other barriers. I've personally navigated through those. My parents, when I helped them to retire, to realize everything they ever earned was simply for day-to-day needs, food on the
Mhm.
table and rent. They couldn't put money aside for retirement. My joke is I'm my parents' 401k. They've invested everything in me,
Right.
right? It's not a diversified investment, but I am committed to their well-being. And they live with me now. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful and honored that I can do that for them.
Yeah. And I laugh just because of the awareness and almost as a release because it's a terrible situation to be in if you don't have any resources, and it's you kind of think that maybe we might have um, something in this country that would kind of take that into consideration, but there's systemic forces at play.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Exactly. It's systemic forces that have been failing us from crib to coffin. I see it at every stage of life, from the child who's born into poverty and never gets the education he or she deserves because of their zip code and a chronically underfunded school, to then if you're lucky enough you make it out, you get to college, then sometimes you're behind academically because you weren't challenged and
Mhm.
didn't receive the resources, then you enter the workforce, there's other forces. If you dare become a mother, then, as a working mother, that's another struggle. You retire, you age. There's always a barrier at each path of the way, each stop along the way.
That leads me quickly to the whole idea of Social Security. Um, what are your feelings about that? What do you see? It's been something where there have been any cost increases in Social Security in ages. We do have the Democratic candidate and the incumbent who has championed Social Security. But your own thoughts about it. Can it be strengthened? Is it something that, I mean, I don't ever see it being privatized because, like as with charter schools,
Mhm.
something happens to the dynamic. But I don't know if that's how you feel about that. But it is an issue, and it's a huge issue in this environment, this atmosphere. So what are your thoughts?
Social Security is a phenomenal program, but we need to strengthen it. It's some of the goods. One, we have it. Two, there's cost of living adjustments every year. My parents own Social Security, so every year what they receive goes up a little bit based on inflation. Some of the fundamental issues, however, are one, for a lot of seniors, the benefits they receive are not sufficient to meet their needs. So we really need to be able to pay more. And for some of the people who are receiving benefits, the way those benefits are calculated are really unfair. I was in wealth management before I started practicing law. So I used to read a lot about Social Security and advise clients on Social Security benefits. The way benefits are paid out are based on your 35 highest years of earning. So if you're a person who had to step out of the workforce to care for your children, every year of those 35 that you are not earning any income, you get a big fat zero. That means your average benefits that you're going to receive when you do retire is less because of that. And that's unfair, particularly to mothers who've had to leave the workforce to care for children. And then who pays into Social Security? The income cap right now should be removed so that we're receiving more in benefits. And then once we can actually receive more in benefits, the way we invest the funds that we have, the Social Security fund, right now is just in treasury bills, which is incredibly safe, but also the lowest possible return. If we look at any strong endowment, whether it's private universities or foundations, they are more diversified because when you diversify, you can also get better return. And you diversify based on your needs and your projections. You should have a set of pie of money that's in safe, liquid investments so you can pay out the benefits, but also a piece that's invested for growth. So that way you can continue to grow that fund. And none of that is happening currently.
So was I right when I said the benefits overall have not increased because of that cap, or am I off?
Benefits for recipients have not increased other than really the COLA adjustment
With the COLA
that they get
adjustment.
year to
Yes,
year.
okay.
When you start collecting benefits also affect how much you get. So there's the full retirement age or you could delay until 70. For most people, full retirement age by the time we retire will be 67, somewhere between 66 and a half to 67, but you could delay until 70 to get a bit more benefits. I used to literally plug in all that, do that for my clients to try to optimize what they can get in terms of benefits.
Yeah, I just retired recently from teaching, and so I'm playing that game right now. Yes, but I have friends who've retired and they've already taken their benefits. I'm fortunate enough right now where I don't have to do that yet, and I could wait a little bit.
Right.
And then we always have arguments, of course, about how silly I am if something happens that I would never have collected anything or had any benefits.
I used to do the break-even calculation. At which age would you break even if you were to delay? But for every year you delay, you get about 8% more on average. So it's a very personal decision that you have to make.
I know Social Security is an issue. And that affects everyone in Bristol. I mean, everyone in Bristol at some point or another, and everyone in in all the 27 towns that you're running right now. But of the issues, your own issues, what are your top three that you're absolutely pursuing in this campaign, and that you'd like to kind of inform people on and make sure people are clear about?
Top three issues. First and foremost, I think a lot of the struggles that we are facing are because working people are not earning enough, right? If you're talking about food insecurity, housing insecurity, all these other challenges, it's because we're not earning enough. One of the proposals I've put forward is increasing the federal minimum wage to $25 an hour and tie that to inflation.
When you say that, do people fall on the floor?
No, not yet. People
yet?
have
Yeah.
questions. People have had, well, what about small businesses? In my plan, I do propose supporting small businesses when that's first implemented. And I don't want to phase it in. I want it to be $25 an hour, the new year when that goes into effect, not $2 year over year, because people are really hurting right
Mhm.
now. People can't put food on the table or pay for housing. We have working people who are depending on SNAP benefits to put food on the table. We need to incentivize work. And the way we do that is by paying people enough when they work. And tying it to inflation is also critical because we do know that inflation in many ways is inevitable. I mean, the Fed's responsible to keeping inflation at about 2 to 3%. That's healthy inflation. So we know that's going to happen. So tying it to inflation makes sure that the people who are earning the least among us continue to maintain their purchasing power. As prices go up, their paychecks also can go up year over year.
Mhm. I would counter that somehow. But I almost feel the same.
It's what a lot of research and data shows that it's not an arbitrary number that I pulled out of a hat. That's what research shows people need to be able to pay for food, housing, and basic necessities. And if it's just to have people live with some dignity and decency. It costs more than that for me to support my family and raise my family. So it's not a lavish lifestyle by any means. But
Mhm.
if you're working, you should be earning enough to pay for your basic necessities.
So with small businesses, they're not corporations. I mean, they are incorporated and they might have corporation name, but they're not huge corporations which have so much influence in our society today. What would you propose to support small businesses?
Government grants or some low interest or zero interest loans primarily. Right now, the government is heavily subsidizing huge corporations that are making billions of dollars in profit. And they are paying most of the people who are needing government support and working full time. They're working for those large multinational corporations.
Mhm.
We have the poorest workers among us subsidizing billions of corporate profits. That's just not a sustainable model. The middle class has been shrinking, wages have been stagnating while prices keep going up. When we talk about affordability, there's three elements to affordability. There's the expense part, there's inflation,
Mhm.
but there's also what are you bringing in? If we're simply thinking we're going to just keep bringing costs down and that's going to resolve everything, it's simply not the reality. It's just not true. We also have to ensure that people can earn a living wage when they spend an honest day working.
Okay, so that's number one. I mean, but I'm thinking again, just as devil's advocate on that. Where is that money going to come from? Are the grants that you propose going to be enough money to do that? Zero income, zero, percent grants, zero interest grants. Is there going to be some other program? It's going to be a sustaining thing. So what is in that vision that closes the gap and makes a small business person feel comfortable with a proposal like that, or is it just?
I'm not sure what happened. Sorry. That completely fell.
Yep.
I don't know how to get that back.
You can just hold the mic. Yeah, yeah. If you okay with that, okay. All right. Technical difficulty, folks. All right. So yeah. So I mean, in your own mind, how does that break down for a small business person? They've got to pay employees. They've got to pay employment taxes. They have to pay for, the federal parts, the taxes that go along with that. So what I mean, it's a risk. And so how do you get people to consider that in their own language, their own vocabulary?
So, two things. Statistically, the employers who are chronically underpaying their workers are not the small businesses for the most part. It is really large corporations. And frankly, some of the government contractors and sectors, like our paraeducators in our schools, they are not earning that $25 an hour I've just mentioned,
Mhm.
right? And the schools funded through state and federal and city dollars. The people working in nursing homes that are mostly paid through Medicaid, they're not paying their workers a living wage. And Medicaid is a federal source of funding, and Medicaid pays about 60 cents on a dollar to these nursing homes. So, in addition to them making their profits, they're also not paying their workers enough money. it's not the small businesses that are really getting away with not paying people enough money. Small businesses, a lot of times, they have very few employees, and the ones they have are the owners and family members. It's larger corporations and other entities that either need more funding for the government, or businesses that have enough to pay their workers in the first place, but they're choosing not to. And it is hard for a business to make the case, a big corporation to make the case to pay their workers more, when their primary objective is to maximize shareholder value.
Mm.
If your goal is to maximize shareholder return, and labor costs for most businesses, that's the highest cost.
Mhm.
That's one of the first places you go to. If you can control labor costs, then you could increase how much you get to keep at the end of the day. And we need to change that on its head. I don't think corporations are just going to willingly start paying people more money.
Mhm.
So it's an area where government is necessary to intervene to make sure that we're paying fair wages to everyone. And it's not entirely a novel concept. Government had to intervene with just safety issues in the workplace
Mhm.
after the Industrial Revolution. And people paid for that with their lives. If we think about the radium girls who suffered and died, never saw any compensation for a lot of their suffering, most of them. And now we have work safety laws because of their battles and their fight. This is another area when we've seen for decades wages continue to stagnate and prices continue to go up. So much that a lot of people, my generation and somewhat younger, they've put off having children altogether, not just delaying it, but
Mhm.
just not considering that. The average age of purchasing a home keeps going up and up. The average cost of a home keeps going up and up. First time home buyers keeps dropping. All of those are because wages are going up. And until government takes a decisive and bold step to ensure that working people can make enough to live with decency and dignity, that's going to continue.
So your first issue,
Yes.
that was your first issue. What are your two other
Second,
issues?
healthcare.
Healthcare.
Healthcare should be universal and a right to everyone. And Medicare should include long-term care. In my experience as an elder law attorney, I saw that so many senior Americans, that would be the fastest way that they impoverish themselves or lose everything they've worked for, is paying for long-term care. Because most people don't realize until they're in the thick of it that your Medicare only pays up to 100 days at best for any type of nursing care. If you had a hip replacement, have to go to rehabilitation or something to that effect. After that, you're on your own. And by the time you realize that, you're priced out of getting long-term care insurance. And now the long-term care insurance policies that are being written, they are not as robust as the old policies because insurance companies are in it for profit. They realize that they need to reduce benefits that are being paid out, cap how much benefits you can receive. So all of these lend themselves to be that even for the person who's the best planner, you just can't plan for some of these things. I used to have clients come to me who had plenty of savings and were comfortable, and they purchased long-term care insurance,
Mhm.
but their premiums kept going up year over year. And now it was a choice between, do I reduce my benefits so that the premiums don't go up? Do I drop the policy altogether? What are the risks? And I would walk them through Medicaid eligibility and all the avenues and analyze what their assets are to determine, well, if you do drop this, what can you expect to happen? And there were just really intimate and personal conversations about how to navigate the systems that we
Mhm.
have. But those systems, we chose those systems. We can
Yeah.
choose, we can actually insure every person.
Somebody set up those systems.
Exactly.
And that's, I keep going back to the whole idea, we still are a democracy.
For
We're
now,
still- we're
yes,
supposed to be,
fighting for that to be
for
the
the
case.
people, by the people, of the people.
Yes,
And I think we forget that that is still the basic foundation.
right.
And individuals need to be re-educated. I think almost in that way. And I hate to use the word re-education, but but educated in that in the fact that it is people who should be kind of not controlling, but have a say in what's going on.
Right.
And somehow there's been that disconnect, and that has have all these crazy ramifications right now. Number three.
Number three is a tie between education and immigration. I think both are critically important. Education, because it is public education, fully funding public education is a priority, not only because I've gone through public school from 7th grade through law school, but because it is a way of investing in our children, therefore investing in our future. And I see the disparity in the quality of education that a child receives based on their zip code. And we are losing brilliant minds, and people are failing to achieve their full potential and contribute to the vitality of this country because we're not investing in them at an early age. And I say immigration not only because I'm an immigrant, but because this country has been made stronger by immigrants who come here and work really hard to contribute to their communities. And the people who self select to come here, like my mother, they are really hardworking people who will do anything to achieve their goals and make sure that their children get to live better lives than they did. That's a lot of them. That's their version of the American dream. It's not that they expect to accomplish all that themselves, but they know that if they work really, really hard,
Mhm.
their children can have a better future than they had. In my family, we've seen that, and we're so fortunate and blessed. But we have an administration now that is, and it's not just this administration, prior to this, chronically underfunding education for decades. But with respect to immigration, we have an administration that is demonizing immigrants,
Mm.
spending billions of dollars on, they claim immigration enforcement, but really what they're doing is indiscriminately harming people, arresting people, whether they're lawful or unlawful, harming people, as we've seen in Minneapolis, killing 2 American citizens. It affects all of us. You know, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, you know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Allowing the government to have a private mercenary that can go into American streets and intimidate people, spread chemical agents, shoot people, harm people, detain people with no due process whatsoever.
Mhm.
Any of us could fall victim to that. So we're all weakened. All of our civil liberties and constitutional rights are under attack when an immigrant's constitutional right is under attack.
Um, well, I have so many things going through my mind right now. I mean, we've got the funding. We're going to fund the government right now, and Democrats have taken the position where they simply cannot support the bill the way it's written because of the fact that it would be funding to the tunes of billions of dollars,
Right.
right? The Department of Homeland Security and ICE. So when it comes to that, how does that happen in our government where we're in a Congress right now that is so divided? Or I'm not going to say it's so divided because they do get some things done. But when it comes to these issues, there doesn't seem to be any kind of, middle ground. Or if there is middle ground, it kind of gets pulled out from under people with a word from on high. So how would you see yourself operating in that kind of environment? If you can imagine that, and it's a hypothetical, of course, so it's very open ended.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent my whole life playing offense and defense. Um, I say the path to being an undocumented immigrant who did not speak any English 26 years ago to sitting here with you tonight, it was a more arduous and uncertain path than the 6 months ahead to potentially get elected to Congress or go
Mm.
through the primary. There's more, I have a roadmap and metrics and things you do to get to potentially winning a primary. There wasn't that roadmap when I was an undocumented kid with parents who couldn't guide
Mm.
me through the process and no certainty about what would happen, and far less, frankly, within my control than I have now. So that, in a way, uniquely prepares me for getting to Washington, D.C., because I know what it's like to come into an uncertain territory with unstable grounds under my feet and just having to adjust and take on a lot of new information and just sort of navigate that and make the best of it. And with respect to the ICE funding that we find ourselves in now, my view is, and I know because we don't have the House or the Senate, we're limited as to what we could do as Democrats. But the way ICE is operating right now, I don't believe there's any training that will help them be better. The stated purpose of DHS, which is to protect our homeland and make sure we're safe and there's not any terrorist activity in our land, it is simply not what they're doing anymore. Their primary goal now is them actually doing the terrorizing to immigrants and US citizens alike. So I am very encouraged to see every Democrat who's not willing to support this bill and refusing to vote yes. Ultimately, I think we need to abolish ICE. There's ways to do immigration enforcement. There's already local police forces to enforce criminal laws. We have the FBI. There's ways to do all of these things without having a body that is operating as if it's above the law with no accountability and complete immunity, it seems, that's just not a model that you can correct and revamp. It needs to be done away with.
Those are strong words.
They
Yeah,
are strong
yeah.
words. And, I, as someone who is very close to the ground to see what is happening within the communities where that fear is real, it's hard not to say that. I know people who've already left this country and
Mhm.
gone somewhere else where they don't know anyone, don't have any friends or family members because they're too fearful what might happen to them here. Haitians who've been here for decades will lose their temporary status as of February 3rd. I would be
Mhm.
one of those people if my husband wasn't a US citizen. I would be subject to deportation. Everything about me would be the same. I could have still been married. I could have still had my American children. I could still be an attorney. I could still have the same job that I have now. Yet I would have been subject to deportation and I would be living in fear. And even as a US citizen, I now carry around with me proof of citizenship. I have a
Mhm.
photocopy of my passport and certificate of naturalization because I visibly look like the people who are being targeted by ICE.
Does that provide any protection? Really?
And that's the thing, not really.
Yeah.
But I hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Mhm.
If I'm in a situation, I'll have to make the personal assessment. Do I simply try to argue that these are my rights, you can't do these things, or do I feel so vulnerable and I try to say, look, I have proof with me, can I show it to you? As we've been seeing, when there's no due process, you're just at the whim at whichever ICE agent happens to stop you. And I don't know if that ICE agent is going to be a proud boy or someone who genuinely think that they want to enforce our laws with fidelity to what our laws actually are.
Mhm. Yeah, we can go on for a long time
Yes.
on that particular subject there. So a couple of questions. I'm just seeing right now we're doing great. Um, so we have a question from somebody in the audience. Said, how do you plan to represent people who are struggling with systemic oppression and poverty?
Thank you for that question. Systemic oppression and poverty are so deeply rooted. And it's one of the reasons I am in this race because I think as someone who's personally experienced those, I'm more incentivized to go and try to change them because the status quo has not propelled me forward. The status quo has held me back. I think my proposal for increasing the federal minimum wage that addresses some of the systemic poverty. Fully funding our public schools to create more opportunity for all students that addresses another systemic barrier that people face depending on their zip code and where they happen to live and what schools they can attend. Addressing healthcare and making healthcare universal, including long-term care as part of Medicare and healthcare, that addresses the needs of not only working people, but also people who've worked hard and now are on fixed income or are retired and are concerned about what they've saved and what they can spend on. Those are all policies that will help make people's lives better. My lens that I bring to policymaking is people first. I think we've swung so far towards protecting institutions and protecting sectors and not about what about the people who create this economy, the people who keep those institutions and the sectors, whether it's public, private, whichever sector of the economy, their engine, they're powered by people.
Mhm.
We need to make sure that people have what they need and people can reach their full potential, and then the economy will grow.
So I'm thinking about you say institutions. There are governmental institutions.
Mhm.
There are private institutions. So would you make a distinction between when you said government basically is a an engine for good? It's so when you speak of our institutions like that, and it sounded like they were all in one big basket.
Mhm.
Is that what you mean, or can you make a distinction?
No, there's definitely a distinction.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between government institutions and private institutions. And then within the private sector, there's a difference between the for profit ones and the not for profit ones, or some institutions that sort of straddle the two that are like quasi governmental, but have more independence. And they have different roles and different functions in society. But ultimately, all of those institutions, private or not, they are powered by people. And The reality is our democratic institutions, they are not self-actualizing and self-perpetuating. It takes people to keep them going. And when we think of our democracy doesn't simply just carry on. It takes our commitment to it, our involvement to keep it going. The rights that we've earned, that our ancestors have fought to earn for us, as we've been witnessing, we can very much lose those rights if we don't choose to re-engage and keep fighting, not just to maintain them, but to expand those rights.
Something just flashed in my brain. Haiti was one of the first colonies over here that sought independence.
The very first
The
Black
very
nation
first,
to become a
yes,
free
to
country.
become a free country.
Mhm.
Yes, that was that's and yet some systemic things have happened
Right.
so that they haven't prospered like other democratic countries. And people have a certain idea of Haiti that is kind of removed from what people would like and people aim for and the lives that they'd like to have. Um, just something I just thinking about that. Um, how out of touch are today's politicians, and what makes you different for us to vote for you? And I'd like to kind of like throw that out there. Um, uh, you are running against a person who's running for his 15th term.
Mhm.
John Larson is, he has a strong voice. He has seniority where he is. What motivates you to run now at this particular time, and knowing John generally? I mean, Larson is he's been endorsed by labor. And so you say you have certain metrics for getting to that primary. So I'm kind of like mashing things together. So what makes you different, but and specifically what makes you different from a John Larson?
I mean, if we look at the composition of Congress now, it is first and foremost, incredibly wealthy. And it's not necessarily like people who are self-made. A lot of them are people who are born into privilege and are propelled forward because of that privilege. And those are not the people who are incentivized to change and challenge the status quo, because the status quo has served them well. I am someone who's been held back by that status quo. I've had to navigate so many broken systems personally and with the work that I've done and with my family members, that I see the human cost of these failed systems. About 7% of our congressional members are mothers of young children. And we wonder why we don't have more family friendly policies like universal child care and early learning, paid family leave, those types of policies. It's because the people who are legislating our laws are not living those day to day struggles and experiences like we are. And what sets me apart, I can say with confidence, I'm the only candidate in this race who's faced on a very personal level several systemic barriers, have navigated them, and have overcome them and to get to the other side. That experience is deeply lacking in Washington, D.C. My struggles have shaped who I've become far more than my accomplishments. And to think that we're represented by so many people who have accumulated a lot of accomplishments, but never really struggled or faced personal obstacles, it shapes who they are and how they serve. It shapes how they approach policymaking, how they compromise, what they will compromise on, and it makes a material difference. I've been in rooms already when I've been the only person with the perspective that I've brought. I've been in rooms when I've stepped up and say, we are the body in charge of making this decision, and this decision is going to widen the pay gap between the top earners of this company and the bottom earners of this company. I don't know that someone without my perspective and lived experiences would think it and then dare to say it out loud in a room of people who think their job is to approve these executive compensation packages while not approving the pay raises that the lowest earners are requesting. I've been in rooms where people with funds are thinking about how do we help communities that are marginalized and underserved, students who are going to college. And I'm the one putting my hand up and saying, have you considered immigration status? Because some very high achieving students do not have access to the FAFSA and federal funding and student
Mhm.
loans because of their immigration status. How are you accounting for them? I was one of those students. I've been in a room where I'm thinking about, or even just my policy to ensure that long term care is included as part of Medicare. It's because of the experience of seeing my clients come to me who felt like they were becoming a burden on their families because they had to spend everything they have on their care. And then they would run out and they figure, what am I going to do next? Those experiences, and I've had to adjust my own thinking. I'll speak for myself. I think we've been ingrained to think what qualifies as experience in Congress.
Mhm.
And experience is accomplishments and accolades and having served in office before and doing it a certain way. You do this, then you do that. Yet what is really lacking is the experience of living with those policies day in and day out. That's the experience that I can bring. And that's the experience that no matter what you do, you can't acquire that once you get to the halls of Congress.
Mhm.
I will acquire more legislative experience. I will acquire more knowledge about how to better navigate Congress and how to get things done. Everyone who gets there does that. I've done that in other systems. I will do that before. And anyone who's new to Congress have to figure that out anyway. But the experience of knowing what it's like to be oppressed and feel like there's no one at the table who's advocating for you and talking for you, that we're lacking.
I'm almost hearing that in some ways when you use the word oppressed, people think of one thing and they get a visual in their head. But in some ways, what I'm maybe hearing is we have oppressed populations, such as our elderly, who might fit into that category. And maybe not connect those dots because it's a way of thinking. They're already in the room thinking they've made it. They've been professionals. This is where they are now, and yet struggling, but not acknowledging that they may be part of a larger community of people who are also struggling. I Again, just making that kind of connection about how we see things, because I'm always thinking about people, um, who need to engage and need to do some of the things that you said that they have to. Democracy is a business not a business. It's a it's an occupation. It's a way of life that requires constant vigilance in lots of ways
Mhm.
because it's so easy to kind of step back, let things work the way they do, but they end up in our particular system heading always in the same direction, which I think is what you mean by systemic. Because when people hear systemic, I'm not quite sure they pin down what would be a systemic example of something that's systemic in our society. So, I mean, you have talked about the way healthcare works
Mhm.
and end of life issues, not end of life issues, but healthcare issues toward the end of one's life. Is that what you would qualify as a systemic issue? Something where it runs this way, seems to have a life of its own, and when decisions are made, they are almost predetermined.
In short, yes. So when I say systemic, I mean something that is also structural. It is designed to be that way.
Yeah.
If you think of school funding, a lot of it comes from property taxes. Property taxes comes from the value of the home. So by definition, when you have an area with lower property values, they get less property taxes and the schools get less funding. And then the students who attend those schools also are the children of those families in those lower value properties. That means they probably earn less money. There's more concentration of need and poverty, and maybe food desert because there's not grocery store in some low income
Mhm.
areas. All of those needs become so concentrated, and it just becomes the structure that we're in. And I see it in Hartford with so many of our schools and just the struggles that kids come in day to day. My children go to school every day. They've had a full breakfast at home. They get to choose what they want for breakfast because my parents live with us. My mom loves to make them a
Mhm.
custom made
Mhm.
breakfast every morning. There are children who come to that school. The breakfast they get in school, that's the breakfast they get. The lunch they get, that's the only lunch they get. And then when they get home, they may or may not get a dinner
Mhm.
or a meal that will fill their bellies. Each those The system is designed that way, and until we change it, until we do it differently, it's going to be really hard to address the issues at their very roots.
Um, I think about education too. Um, what do you think is a component of education in the U.S. education system that is absolutely necessary? I think about like the whole idea of educating for democracy, because as an educator myself, and lots of times I feel like I've failed in my role, um, because there is this um, gap right now and there's this thing where people don't feel like they are part of what's happening or don't take on the responsibility of being a citizen. um, I don't know if you wanted to talk about I mean, I really think, um, like what I hear is that to be involved in a democratic society, it has to be a conscious and intentional thing.
Mhm.
And are we conscious of that and intentional in our education, or have we kind of went along and thinking that things would all work out, um, but somehow they haven't necessarily worked that way? People are frustrated right now. It's easy to blame people for being in the situation that they're in. It's easy to get angry. Now we have a situation where people are fearful. These are not part of a constitution that thinks, can think in a democratic fashion. Is that is so? When we think of systemic, is that, do we need to be more intentional about our democracy, and how
Well,
do you work that into
yeah, I mean, we have to be more intentional. When I first started practicing, the managing partner at the firm where I was, he used to always say, when you're doing marketing, you have to be thinking 10 years ahead, because if you're just thinking today, you'll just always fall
Mhm.
behind. I think in a democracy, what we as lead, if you're elected to be a leader, you have to be thinking about the needs of people today, but also anticipate future needs and build a system in a society where those needs can be addressed in the future and where you keep thriving. We have so much short-term results and short-term decisions because people just care about the next election cycle and the next
Mhm.
decision and just tomorrow, and it's not sustainable. We've had such a great start and such a strong foundation that we've been able to get away with it for a really long time, but it's not going to be sustainable in perpetuity. And I think we need to reverse course and be more strategic in terms of how we spend our resources as a country. Instead of billions of dollars on ICE, for example, or the level of defense spending that we do in some very ineffective ways, how do we take those same funds and reinvest in education and vocational training and providing healthcare to people, so that way people have better quality of lives and better potential reached during the course of their lives. So those are all conscious decisions that we have to make as a society. And if you're someone who is struggling day to day with just food on the table, housing insecure, food insecure, when you're in that day to day struggle, it's really hard to think
Mhm.
about long term plans and strategic thinking, because you're just in this daily grind of what you need to do. But our leaders are not, frankly, in that daily grind. They have enough, or you should be thinking for the things that your constituents need and will need in the future, and planning for that and legislating for that.
Well, I think we're going to wrap things up. I have a few things to say about some of our programs. But before I do that, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to cover?
No, we've covered it all. I will say, I'll just add that, being able to run for Congress at this stage in my life is incredibly unusual for someone with the background that I have. And I just want to be very transparent with folks with what made that possible. I have made very deliberate career choices to be able to provide for my family. And that those choices have also allowed me, when I realized that everything I've worked for is under attack by this administration and our very democracy is under attack, I feel like at this point I can lose everything and have nothing else to lose. I was able to put my professional career on the side for about a year to be able to run for Congress. But also, it takes a village to allow me, as a 37-year-old mother of three
Mhm.
young children and a wife, to run for Congress. My parents live with me, in part because they were immigrants who didn't earn enough. Again, like I said, I'm their 401k. I sort of joke, but also because it's part of our culture. I love having them with me. They're thrilled to be there. but my mom gets to wake up every day with her grandchildren, and she helps, she does a lot of the cooking for them, and they love Haitian food and all the stuff that she makes that I still don't know how to cook till this day. And I say I have so much privilege through my family structure and sort of the professional choices that I've made, but I can't replicate my mother for every working mom who wants to pursue a career and feels forced out of the workforce. I can't ensure that everyone can take a year away from work to pursue elected office and serve their country at the level that I'm trying to do. I'm doing that now because I want to go to DC and fight so that more people can have the ability to do some of the things that I've been so fortunate to be able to do. More people can have affordable college education. More people can earn a living wage and be able to support their families. More people can choose to help their parents retire if they so choose. Those are very deliberate choices that I've made for my family to make sure we're taken care of before I put myself in a more public sphere. But those are the very things, what I've done for my family personally, that's what I want to do for Connecticut families and for the American public. I consider myself as a huge beneficiary of the American promise, even though it arguably wasn't designed for me, a kid from Haiti who came here as an undocumented immigrant. Yet I've reaped the benefits. To see that those opportunities are drying up and being very systematically dismantled by the Trump administration, I'm determined to counter that and to create even more opportunities than existed when I started this journey. And that's why I'm running for Congress and running for Congress now.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Ruth Fortune, people. She is running for First District Congress, that is the House of Representatives. She is also a person who is challenging John Larson, who is the incumbent, who's running for his 15th term. So, Ruth, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everything you had to say, and I really I admire the fact that you are taking this step. Toward that end, I have a few things to say. That we will be back on Talking Bristol next week. We have the Avenue tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with Aaron Castro. Aaron, and then we are also doing a special on. We're going to be live streaming the Bristol Central Bristol Eastern wrestling match on February 11th. That has a pre-game and a pre-match, a post-match, and the actual match itself. And then, as I said, Talking Bristol will be back next week. So once again, Ruth Fortune, thank you so much. And, in this crazy weather, stay safe.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.